Ever felt like the wind was talking to you? Her voice is low, steady, carried across the dry land where sand and wind cling to each other like they have nowhere else to go. She sits on the worn front porch, a dark brown dress layered with dust, staring out at a wide, empty stretch of earth. The wind threads through her long black hair, bringing with it the faint scent of old fire. "It was blowing like this the day they killed my husband," she murmurs, almost to herself. The wind did not pity me. It did not grieve. It only asked one question. Her eyes narrow toward the horizon. "Are you going to keep living, Aiyana?" Far in the distance, the steady sound of hoofbeats begins to rise. Slow, heavy, each one like the heartbeat of someone returning from a place beyond loss. On the frontier, the wind always finds a way in. It slips through every crack in the wood, through loose door frames, through the gaps in an old roof weathered by time. And tonight, it finds its way into the small cabin where a woman has lived alone through 2 hard winters. Aiyana sits by the window, holding a half-burned oil lamp. The fading flame throws a soft glow across her sun-browned face and dark, stone-colored eyes. On the table lies a silver bracelet. It is the only thing she kept from her husband. She does not wear it. She does not hide it. She leaves it where she can see it, as if to remind herself that some losses are not meant to be forgotten. You simply learn how to live beside them. Outside, the night is deep and slick as cold water. The nearest town, Red Mesa, is only a few miles away, yet she rarely goes there. The townsfolk stare at her with a mix of fear and curiosity. The native widow. The woman they whisper about behind closed doors. The one they believe brought bad luck to her husband. They never say it to her face, but Aiyana hears everything. Out here, the West does not need to shout to kill someone. Silence, used the right way, can do the job. A noise stirs in the yard. Aiyana turns her head, sets the lamp down, and reaches for her husband's old rifle hanging on the wall. Her hands do not shake. Those hands have hunted, farmed, stitched up their own wounds. Yet her eyes are different tonight. Steady, deep, too calm for someone alone. The wind whips through the fence posts and carries the sound of hoofbeats from far beyond the ridge. A runaway horse? Or someone looking for a place to hide? She cannot tell. Still, her heartbeat matches the rhythm of the wind. Slow, certain, unafraid. Aiyana steps onto the porch. Moonlight spills across the roof and the splintering beams. From here, she can see the distant ridge where her husband died on a hunting trip. They called it an accident. Aiyana knows better. In this land, accidents often have someone's face attached. Far off, a torch flickers, then another. The flames grow brighter as they move closer. 3 men, at least. She does not need to guess why they came. This land, even though it is just a few dry acres, sits directly along the route of a new irrigation line. The government wants to buy it, but the deed is in her husband's name. To them, a native widow has no right to anything except the ground she stands on. Aiyana does not step back. She calmly pulls her hair into a tight twist, closes her coat, and walks inside. She places the rifle on the table beside the lamp. The flame trembles against the steel. Then she sits and continues sewing a small tear in the blanket, as if the voices outside are just another gust of wind passing through. Moments later, there is a knock. 3 sharp hits. Firm, confident. "Mrs. Aiyana," a man calls, his voice rough, smug. "It's too late night for someone like you to still be awake." She says nothing. Another knock. Harder. "We just want to talk. About your land." Open the door unless you are hiding something. Aiyana sets her needle down and rests her hand lightly on the silver bracelet. The wind sweeps through the porch and suddenly blows out the oil lamp. Darkness. Only moonlight remains. She lets out a quiet laugh, barely a breath. People forget this land had a voice long before they ever learned how to dig for water. A gunshot cracks the air, not loud, not aiming at anyone, but it is enough. Silence follows. Outside, boots shuffle. Someone mutters a curse. They leave. The wind dies down. The cabin settles back into stillness. Aiyana sits there, the moon drawing a soft line of silver across the table. For the first time in months, she does not feel fear. She feels awake. Out on the ridge, a lone rider has stopped his horse at the edge of town. He heard the single gunshot. The wind carries toward him the faint scent of lamp oil from the home that just went dark. He leans forward on the saddle and whispers to himself, "Someone out there still has the guts to shoot at the night." Then he pulls on the reins and starts toward the cabin with the wind-scarred roof. Dawn arrived slowly, as if even the sun was hesitant to shine on this wind-burned land of red dust and dry grass. Under a sky the color of ash, the steady rhythm of hoofbeats echoed across the open field. A man rode a gray horse, weaving through brittle yellow weeds that crumbled under the wind. His name was Elias. Once, he carried a gun for the army, moving from town to town, trying to bury a past that refused to die. Eventually, he learned that no bullet ever ends anything. It only leaves another scar. So he walked away, traded war for cattle and open roads, leaving nothing behind but hoofprints and the tired sighs of his horse. This morning, he stopped in front of the old cabin, the same place where a gunshot cracked the quiet night. Not a shot meant to kill. A shot from someone who was done being afraid. Elias dismounted, tied his horse to a fence post, and stepped up to the door. The door was slightly open, a thin trail of smoke drifting from the crooked chimney. He knocked once. No answer. Then the wind nudged the door open for him. Inside, Aiyana was rebuilding a dying fire. The flames lit her cheekbones, her neatly tied dark hair, and the unblinking steadiness in her eyes. She didn't look at him when she spoke. "You lost?" Her voice was calm, almost bored. "Not exactly," Elias answered. "I heard a gunshot last night. Thought I should check if someone was hurt. No one was hurt." "Then why fire a shot?" "To remind them I am still here." That answer pulled a short, dry laugh from him. He knew people like her. People who only pull the trigger when the world needs to be reminded they exist. Aiyana poured hot water into a chipped cup and slid it toward him. "How far are you traveling?" "Hard to say. Depends on the horse. Depends on the wind." "Wind changes direction often around here. You might get lost." He took a slow sip, voice low. "As long as I can hear the wind, I know there is always a way forward." For the first time, she looked straight at him. Her gaze wasn't hopeful. It was a test. The kind of look from someone who has run out of faith and wants to know if there is any reason to try again. The wind pushed through the window, brushing the curtain aside. The cabin filled with little noises, wood creaking, fire crackling, the quiet breathing of two strangers who somehow didn't feel like strangers. Elias noticed a rifle hanging on the wall. "Your husband's?" "Yes, old, but I keep it." "He gone long?" "A year and a half. They called it an accident." "And you? Do you believe that?" Aiyana's eyes shifted toward the distant ridge. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, "This land kills slowly. Sometimes it just waits to see who breaks first. Elias understood. He had felt that same slow death before. It did not need bullets. Wind and memory were enough. He stood to leave. She spoke without turning. "What is your name?" "Elias." "Will you stay in Red Mesa?" "Maybe a few days. Heard someone here needs a horse wrangler." "My horses could use watching too." He paused. A small, surprised smile tugged at his mouth. He was not sure he had really been invited to stay. Aiyana hadn't changed expression, still composed, still self-contained, but her eyes were softer, just for a second. He stepped onto the porch. The morning sun slid across the dry earth, pale and gold like thin honey. Behind him, she called out, "Elias, if the wind changes direction, don't ask why. Around here, wind only changes when someone begins to believe in something again." He looked back, slightly tilting his head. The breeze rose gently, carrying with it the faint smell of wood smoke and horse sweat. And underneath all of that, something else, the scent of a beginning. That night, a sandstorm rolled in without warning. The wind screamed down from the ridgeline, dragging an entire sky of red dust with it, swirling like wild animals searching for a way into the valley. Elias ran from the horse shed to the house and pulled the wooden door shut before the wind could rip it off its hinges. Inside, Aiyana was tending the fire, but the smoke refused to rise, twisting in the air like it couldn't find its way out. The flames reflected across her cheekbones, the weathered bronze of her skin, and the depth in her eyes. Something restless lived behind that stillness. "This storm will drag on till morning," Elias said, brushing sand off his coat. "Storms always pass," she replied quietly. "But the dust stays." They sat in silence, listening to sand strike the roof and the panicked whinnying of horses outside. Elias almost spoke, wanting to fill the quiet, but stopped. With her, silence was not empty. It was weighted. It meant something. Aiyana finally asked, so soft he almost missed it. "You ever hear the dead speak?" Elias turned. "What do you mean? In the wind, in the fire? I hear them, for years now. Thought I was losing my mind." She stared into the flames as if she could read her memories in the coals. "The first time I heard them, I was 13. They burned our camp. My parents, my little brother. I ran, but the smell of fire never leaves." Elias didn't ask questions. He simply nodded and pulled an old blanket a little closer to her, so she wouldn't shiver when the wind cut through the cracks. Aiyana continued, voice steady, never trembling. "After that, I was taken, sold more than once. People said I was lucky because my skin is lighter than some. But luck like that just makes it easier for men to put a price on you." She laughed, though nothing about the sound resembled joy. "Then a man married me. Didn't hurt me. Didn't force me. He just said, 'You can rest now.' I thought that was enough." She paused, breathing slowly. "But peace that belongs to someone else is still a cage. When he died, people looked at me like a debt. Some wanted the land. Some wanted my body. The only thing that was mine was the wind." The fire cracked. Elias stayed silent. He understood that kind of storytelling, not begging for pity, just needing someone to hear the truth. He had hidden his own guilt in silence for years. A flash of lightning lit her face, strong, tired, and entirely alive. "You afraid of anything?" she asked. "I'm not sure," Elias said. "Maybe I'm afraid of forgetting. Forgetting is easy, and forgetting something feels like a slow kind of death." Aiyana nodded. "Some people die and are still remembered. Some are alive and already forgotten. I just don't want to be the second kind. The storm roared harder, as if trying to swallow the entire house. Aiyana stood and lowered a heavy cloth over the window. Then she sat again, closer than before. Neither of them spoke. The fire, the wind, and their breathing filled the space between them. After a while, she spoke again, barely above a whisper. I used to think my body was something other people had the right to own. When my husband died, I didn't cry. I just felt lighter, light enough it scared me. Elias looked at her. There was no pity in his expression, only respect, the quiet kind, the kind from someone who knows how real pain feels. Aiyana watched the fire. I don't know if I'll ever own anything in this life, but tonight, when I hear the wind beat against the door, I think maybe I want to try. Outside, the storm began to change. The sand still swept across the plain, but the sound softened, shifting from anger to breath. Elias smiled faintly, just for a heartbeat. What will you try? To live, in my own way. The fire snapped, sending a scatter of ash upward, the air filled with the smell of smoke, dust, and horsehide. Old smells, raw and true. That night, the two of them sat in silence, not to forget their pain, but to finally let it rest. So that when morning came and the sun broke through the dust, there would still be somewhere left to walk toward. After the sandstorm, the world went strangely quiet. Dust still hung heavy in the air, but the sun pushed up behind the mountains anyway, pale and trembling like a child learning how to walk. Aiyana stepped onto the porch and drew in a long breath. The smell of damp soil mixed with ashes, burnt wood, and the faint scent of leather from the saddle. It was the fragrance of survival. Out in the yard, Elias was repairing the fence the wind had knocked down. He didn't talk. He just worked, hammering each nail, tying each rope back into place, moving slowly and steadily, like the act of mending something was the only thing keeping him upright in a world that fell apart too easily. Aiyana watched him for a moment. His silence didn't unsettle her. It steadied her. Maybe because it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of someone who knew how to exist without hurting anyone to prove he was strong. "Do you need anything?" she asked, voice rough from the wind. Elias looked up and smiled. "Just hoping this hammer doesn't snap. What about you? Do you need anything?" Aiyana hesitated, then said quietly, "Yes, I need to learn how to shoot that gun again." Elias raised a brow but didn't ask why. He simply wiped his hands on his pants and nodded. "All right, when the wind dies down, we'll start." That afternoon, they walked to the open field behind the house. She held the old gun with both hands. They still trembled. The last time she'd fired a gun was the night her husband died. Back then, the weapon was used to shoot into the air. A farewell no one answered. Elias stood behind her, not too close, giving her enough space to breathe. "You don't need to aim forever," he said. "Don't think about hitting the target. Just think about sending the bullet where you want it to go." Aiyana exhaled and pulled the trigger. The shot hit dirt, a few yards from the target. Elias didn't laugh or correct her. He just nodded. "Again." She fired again. This time, the bullet slapped the edge of the wooden target, kicking up dust. Aiyana tightened her jaw. Her eyes held something different now. Not anger, not fear, resolve. Again. Gunshot after gunshot echoed across the dry field. 3 shots, 4 shots, 5. Every miss made her stance stronger, her breath steadier. On the 6th bullet, she hit the center of the board, a clean, sharp crack. She didn't cheer. She simply smiled, a real smile, the first since her husband's death. Elias didn't clap. He just watched her. "See?" "See what?" she asked. "You just ordered iron and gunpowder to listen to you. That isn't easy." She laid the gun down, breathing hard. "No, I didn't command anything. I just stopped being afraid of it." That evening, Aiyana sat on the porch, watching the sunset stain the land red. The wind was gentle, carrying the smell of horses and cook fire. Elias sat one step below her, a cigarette in hand he never lit. "Elias," she said quietly, "have you ever felt like you were only existing for somebody else?" "Yes," he answered, voice low. "And it took me half a lifetime to realize that existing like that is just another way of disappearing." Aiyana looked out toward the horizon. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, softly, to herself more than to him, she said, "I spent years not knowing what I wanted, only what others wanted from me. Maybe it's time to learn something different. Maybe it's time to learn how to say, 'I want.'" The wind shifted. The field grew still, the last birds of the evening cutting across the sky. The light from the sunset touched her face, tired but finally alive. Elias looked at her and smiled gently. "So what do you want, Aiyana?" She took her time before answering. Slow, clear, true. "I want to live, and this time, I want to live my way. No applause, no music. Just the wind moving through the grass and the quiet scent of sunlight and freedom." For an entire week, the wind never truly blew. It moved through the desert in thin, weak breaths, as if even the land itself was holding still. Aiyana felt something approaching, something she had known before, something she once recognized by the smell of dust and the sound of hooves moving in the dark. On Friday afternoon, Elias returned from town. Red dust clung to his coat, and his eyes carried a sharp, watchful tension. "3 strangers showed up in Red Mesa," he said. "Asked for directions to your place." Aiyana didn't look surprised. "Who are they?" "Briggs," Elias replied. "Chaktian 2 hired guns." The name hit the air like a stone dropped into still water. Briggs, the rancher from the south, the man who once bought her when she was barely a girl, a man who believed a woman's body was property and her silence was proof of obedience. Aiyana clenched her hand so tightly that her knuckles cracked. "What does he want?" "Your land papers. Someone told him your husband left the deeds somewhere in this house." "And if I don't hand it over?" Elias looked straight at her. "Then he'll take it another way." She nodded, not angry, not afraid, just steady, like she had been waiting for this storm for a very long time. The next morning, she woke early. She cleaned the house, filled the oil lamp, wiped down the gun, and set a single bullet on the table. Elias watched and asked, "You planning to run?" Aiyana shook her head. "No, I'm planning to stay." She went out back and lit a fire. Smoke drifted into the air, the smell leaking across the yard. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to think silence was the only way to survive, but silence can kill too, softly and slowly." Elias wanted to argue, but the words died in his throat. He simply nodded. "You don't have to do this alone." "Yes," she said, "I do, because this time, I'm choosing to stand." Sunset bled across the sky like spilled paint. 3 riders appeared at the edge of the field, moving slowly toward the house. The wind finally returned. It whipped up dust, whistled through the dry grass, and carried a metallic scent. Briggs dismounted first. He walked with the confidence of a man who believed the world belonged to him. "Been a long time, Aiyana," he said with a smile that looked more like a knife. "Heard you've become quite the shooter. Not bad for a widow." Aiyana stood on the porch and said nothing. "You know why I'm here. The deed or your signature. If not..." He glanced around, shrugging lightly. "I think you understand." She met his gaze. Her voice was calm. "You always thought a woman has only two choices: lose her land or lose her body. You're wrong." He chuckled and stepped up one stair. "And who do you think you are? The woman who used to fear you, not anymore." The wind howled harder. The roof trembled. Elias stood at the fence, hand resting on his gun. He didn't move. He didn't have to. Aiyana lifted the old gun slowly, deliberately. Briggs laughed. "You won't pull the trigger?" "No," she said, looking him dead in the eyes. "I don't have to be brave. I just have to want to." The gunshot cracked the air. One shot. No one died. The bullet sliced Briggs's shoulder and buried itself into the post behind him. The men froze. Even the wind stopped for a moment. Aiyana stepped off the porch and walked toward him until they were almost face to face. "The last time you touched me, I thought I would die. But I didn't. I lived. I lived long enough to say this. I don't belong to you. I don't belong to anyone." Briggs stumbled backward, hand shaking. Elias drew his gun. His voice was low and steady, the sound of a storm forming. "Leave, Briggs, if you still think you're a man." The three of them mounted their horses. None of them looked back. Hooves faded into the wind. When they were gone, Aiyana stayed where she was. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. She lifted her head. The last of the sunset slipped away, leaving behind a soft, violet sky. Elias walked to her side and laid a hand on her shoulder, gentle as ash settling after a fire. "You all right?" "No," she said, then smiled faintly. "But I'm learning how to be." The wind blew again, warm this time. Inside the house, the oil lamp flickered to life, burning brighter than it ever had, as if the ashes of her past finally turned into light. Spring came late. The first rains were light and scattered, quietly softening the cracked land. Out on the prairie, new blades of grass pushed up through sand and dust, fragile and pale green, like a dream that had just learned how to wake. Aiyana sat on the old fence rail, legs dangling, eyes fixed on the horizon. The mountains no longer looked threatening. They simply stood like old guardians, watching the world continue without rushing it. 3 months had passed since the night Briggs rode away. Word traveled across the territory that he had been arrested, not for what he did to her, but for land fraud, unpaid taxes, and illegal firearms. Justice in the West always arrived late, but sometimes it still arrived even when she no longer waited for it. Aiyana didn't feel joy. She didn't feel vengeance. She felt something quieter, stillness. Not the heavy stillness she had lived in for years, but a gentle one. For the first time, silence didn't mean fear. It meant peace. In the mornings, she walked to the Red Mesa marketplace. People didn't avoid her anymore. Marisol, the woman who ran the cafe, tucked an extra egg into her basket without a word. The young male boy dipped his head awkwardly in greeting. Aiyana nodded back. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened, like rain falling on dry earth. Elias stayed. He built a new horse pen behind the house, taught her how to clip a mane, how to pack a wound with tree resin and salt. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. They worked beside each other, trading glances, sharing silence that no longer hurt. Aiyana slowly learned that not every silence is a cage. Some are shelter. One evening, when the last light of day spilled over the cabin roof like warm honey, Elias stood on the porch, holding an old saddle. "Tomorrow I'm heading to Santa Fe," he said quietly. "Might be gone a while." Aiyana didn't turn around. She kept folding the blanket in her hands. "Do you have to go?" "Yes, but if you tell me to stay, I will." A long pause. The wind brushed against the iron wind chime, making it ring softly. Aiyana kept her back to him. "I don't want someone to stay because of me," she said. Her voice was low but calm. "I want them to stay because they choose to." Elias smiled. "Then I'll think about it." He set the saddle down on the porch and walked toward the barn. Neither of them said another word. That night, the sky was full of stars. Aiyana sat by the small window with a sheet of paper in her hands. Her handwriting was slanted and surprisingly neat for someone who rarely wrote. She wasn't writing a letter, not a diary, just words meant for herself. "I used to be a shadow, now I have shape. I used to be silence, now I know how to say, I want." She slid the paper into a drawer and blew out the lamp. The next morning, the sun was bright and fearless. Wind blew in from the south, carrying the scent of wildflowers. Elias had his horse saddled at the gate. He glanced back at her. "You gonna be all right?" Aiyana smiled, a real smile, unpolished, honest, like sunlight touching water. "I don't need to be all right. I just need to be real." He nodded and mounted the horse. "Maybe I'll come back," she said. "Maybe." He laughed, nudged the horse, and rode off. Hoofbeats faded into the distance until all that remained was a shimmer of dust. Aiyana watched until the last speck disappeared. Then she returned to her chores. Watering grass, hanging clothes, lighting the stove. Nothing remarkable happened, and yet everything was different. Because every movement held one truth. She was free. Around noon, the wind picked up. The door cracked open, and the piece of paper she'd written the night before slipped through the air. It tumbled across the field, spinning in sunlight, until it settled among the new green grass. If someone had stood close enough, they would have seen the words moving gently in the breeze. "I want to live." Late in the afternoon, hoofbeats sounded again. Aiyana paused with a shirt in her hands. She didn't turn around, but she smiled. The hoofbeats slowed, stopped at her porch. A familiar voice broke the silence behind her. "The wind changed direction, Aiyana." She turned. Sunlight fell over her face, warm and golden. Her eyes were steady, deep, alive. "Maybe," she said. The wind was looking for somewhere to rest. No grand confession, no embrace. Just two people standing there in the fading daylight. Two souls who had finally found their way back after losing themselves for years. In a land of dust and blood, people can still find each other even after a lifetime of being lost. And if this story made you pause, even for a moment, to breathe, to feel, to remember that survival can be sacred, then stay with this channel. Because here, we keep following these journeys. Journeys where people learn to say the simplest, bravest words. I want to live.